I mean, really, they need to take all these big banks out and shoot them. That's essentially, I mean, that's what has to happen. They all need to be taken out. All those assets need to be liquidated. We need to clean this thing out and take the deposits and distribute them to all the community bankers that didn't do evil things. We need a banking system. We don't need these banks now. Okay, we need a clearing system. We need a mechanism for people's payments to get from one place to another. That's a legitimate concern. If Paulson was talking about the system collapsing, he's right. We can't have a situation where you can't pay your electric bill. Okay, but there's a difference between having a banking system and having a handful of oligarchs that have systematically looted everything this country stands for. They're not the same thing. I tell people sometimes on the forum and on Blog Talk, I say, you buy, people say, well, I buy gold because it has never gone to zero, right? That's always the argument you keep hearing. And my response to that is, I've never seen ammunition go to zero either. Worst case, you don't need it. 20 years from now, you can sell it to somebody, and they'll go shoot a deer with it or whatever. So I mean, it's the same sort of situation. I think that you've got the same kind of thing going on there, and you need to be prepared for the possibility of really, really ugly things happening. I don't think it's particularly likely. I think the more likely scenario is that we have a lot of very large bankruptcies that should happen that actually do, and that essentially, and I think there's a chance that at this point, having now gone down the road for a year with all the crazy programs that they've tried to do, I think there is some chance that, the Geithners and the Bernackes and everybody else have either realized or are starting to realize that they're running out of the ability to stop it. I mean, you take a look at the fact that they're allegedly, at least, shutting down the quantitative easing on the treasuries. Okay. That sounds to me like an admission that they can't do anymore. Okay? I think there is, that Bernanke is not stupid, and I've heard through back channels, not something that I can provide a citation for because it's off the record stuff. But I have heard through those back channels that some of the Federal Reserve governors have briefed members of Congress on precisely this sort of circumstance. That basically, we took our best shot at this, we're on a rope, and it didn't work. All we're trying to do at this point is keep everything from exploding all at once. But the pain is not over, and, we can play all the happy talk we want, but we're not going to be able to prevent most of the damage from actually happening. And this is what I'm hearing, that these briefings have taken place. The thing is this: if you have Federal Reserve governors that have actually shown up and have had that kind of come to Jesus talk, okay, that's a very positive development if you think about it. All right, because what that means is that despite all the bluster and all the bullshit, they do recognize that they haven't fixed it, that it is going to have to unwind, that it is going to be very unpleasant when it does, and that it's coming, whether we like it or not. Okay, and that, the fact that they recognize this, and again, this is all assuming that, that I'm not having smoke blown off my ass, and I may be, I don't have any way to know, but assuming that, that there's some reality in this means that at some point in the not so distant future, you're going to see some reality start to come back into the market, you're going to see some reality come into housing. What I want to see in the housing area is simple. I think that people ought to be able to buy houses at a reasonable price that they can actually afford. And the only way that can happen is if prices come way down. All right. I mean, all the politicians are hell-bent determined to prevent prices from contracting. And yet the only way that we will ever actually see Americans able to own homes again on a reasonable basis is if exactly the opposite thing happens. So, at some point, I think that, the liquidity stuff comes off. I suspect what's going to force it, probably faster than anything else, is that Fannie and Freddie's default rates continue to go, sky high. They're astronomical. And, that this is going to eventually force them to back away from the attempt to support those guys. That and the embedded defaults that we're seeing now in the FHA programs are just getting totally out of hand. I think ultimately that's what's going to trigger it. And then you're going to see, you're going to see one of those, whoosh kind of downdrafts in the markets. And you're either positioned for it or you're not. There's going to be, it's just like it was, this spring. There really wasn't any opportunity to buy in once it got started. And the same thing on the way down last fall. You were either in a few days in front of it or you missed it. And that was essentially the deal. You were either, in it and prepared and there, or you just kind of sat there with your jaw on the floor going, what in the hell was that? And I did some of both. I mean, I made some money last fall, and early this spring, and then I made some money this summer on the run-up. But, lately I've just been scalping things, and I have been scaling into some longer-term shorts, simply because I think we're pretty much at the end of the road. If we get another blast higher, I'll take them back off. All you can do is look at the macroeconomic environment and say, as a day trader, you can do whatever the tape says. But in the longer term, you're crazy to be positioned against what is going on in the economy. Okay? The people that are out there with 401k money and IRA money, they have a job. They can't sit glued to a terminal all day. All right? I mean, you have to remember, when this thing crashed last fall, remember, we had a couple of days of 700 points down in the Dow. Okay? 40, 50 handles down in the S&P 500. How do you catch that corner? How do you do that? I mean, you come home from work and 10% of your portfolio's gone. Well, you can't do that. You got to be out of the way of those things. You can't, it's one thing to take a 2% drawdown or something like that. That's not all that big a deal. But when you start talking about some of these things that happened last year and early this year, you're crazy. I mean, that's the kind of thing that destroys your performance for 5-10 years. I think the market is fantastically ahead of the fundamentals. I don't think we're going back to 2007 style spending and consumption patterns for a very long time, if ever. I mean, I'm just at this point, I'm kind of just watching with bemusement because and I keep writing about the stuff that's going on and hope that somebody in Washington will wake the hell up and go long handcuffs. I don't know if you saw a thing with Daryl the Friends of Angelo program. The subpoenas have gone out now. Okay, but here's the scuttlebutt that's flying around the last couple of days on this. The Congress people are not the big problem. Big problem is apparently they think they're going to be able to implicate some people on K Street and some of the congressional aides. Now, that's potentially much more serious because if you get these guys on lobbying violations, that's not an ethics issue. That's a felony. Okay, so we're not talking about people being censured in the House. We're talking about people going to jail. So, I mean, there's a possibility here that there's some real fire to go along with all this smoke and thunder. We'll see. I'm not holding my breath because, we've believed this before and it's turned out to be bull. But, I would really like to see these clowns that pulled this crap, wind up, in the Husco, having to worry about whether or not they drop the soap when they get up in the morning. I think that would be absolutely outrageously great. And the American people deserve it. They deserve an answer. They deserve to know what happened.